You are listening to This is Oklahoma, hosted by Mike Hearn, telling stories of Oklahomans and those that have made it their home.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma podcast. Mike Hearn here, your host, back with another episode. Excited to share this episode with you today. But before we do, I've got to thank our sponsors. First of all, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. They've been a huge part of this podcast for the last few years. So the Oklahoma Hall of Fame have been sharing Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com. And for daily updates, go to oklahomahof on Instagram and give them a follow. Our other sponsor today is Chickasaw Nation. Now, the Chickasaw Nation have sponsored pretty much everything in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma, and it's an honor to have their name and their brand supporting this podcast. So a huge shout out to Governor Anatoby for supporting this podcast. It really means a lot. Our third sponsor is Diffie Ford Lincoln down in El Reno. Now, this one makes me so happy because these guys are great friends of mine, play a lot of golf together. I've bought my cars from them, do most of my oil changes down there, have a cup of coffee, hang out down in El Reno. It's a good spot to go. And not only are they great friends, but they provide a great service. So for over 60 years, third generation family owned Oklahoma business down in El Reno. They're also in Bethany as well. So people in the Bethany area know the Diffies really well. But if you're looking for anything new, used, Ford, Lincoln, or whatever, I'm sure they could find anything you want. Check them out, diffieford.net, and then on Instagram at diffiefordlincoln. This episode is brought to you by Hope is Alive. Hope is Alive exists to radically change the lives of drug addicts, alcoholics, and those who love them. Join us on August 11th at the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum for a celebration of hope featuring guest speaker Tim Tebow and musical artist Ben Fuller. Find out more and get your tickets at HIA10.com. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma. Mike Hearn here, host, back with another episode. Gives me great pleasure to introduce to you our guest today, who has a phenomenal story and one a heartwarming story, I think, no pun intended. Mr. Jeff Smith, thank you so much for coming down.
You're welcome. I appreciate you inviting me.
Yeah, so thanks for reaching out. I'm glad that the guys over at Oklahoma City Public OKPSA, Professional Sales Association, kind of connected us or sent you in my direction.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it's really podcasts happen by, you know, referrals and the stories. And, you know, you strike me as someone who's not going to shout from the rooftops, hey, listen to me, I have a great story. But when someone says to you, hey, you should, you know, there's a podcast like Mike's, you should come on. And so I appreciate them and thank you for reaching out because, you know, it's not something that, you know, as Oklahomans and as generally as normal, humble people, I think that we don't like to reach out and talk about ourselves very often. So I appreciate you doing that and following up. And we're here today to hear your story. So
you bet.
I guess before we can start way back if you want, because I know you didn't grow up here, right?
No, I didn't. I actually grew up in Roswell, New Mexico,
Alien
of
town.
All places. Yeah. And so I'll keep my antennas down a little bit so that we can
no green man
continue to talk. That's right. But I grew up there, went to school at West Texas State University in Canyon, Texas, and met my sweetheart there. And so we're about to celebrate, I shouldn't give everything away, but 40 years of marriage this next week. So very excited about that. But I came back to Roswell after graduating from college and started working in a bank as a commercial lender for about 11 years. And then I started my own company called Prime Source Mortgage as a mortgage guy. I've been in that business for 30 plus years. And we actually started our own company, and it ended up having about 32 offices in 10 states. Took the company public. Sounds a lot cooler than it was.
It's more headache.
Yeah. It instead of helping people get into homes, I was dealing with attorneys and accountants and investors. Not there's anything wrong with those guys, but that wasn't the plan. So I do think that caused some health issues, which kind of brings us to today's story.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much, like, as an entrepreneur, you know, that that one kind of whiff of, oh, it must be great to just have a 9 to 5 work, 8 to 4 every day, Monday to Friday, and do absolutely nothing on the weekend other than watch football and do my thing and be with grandkids or whatever. However, entrepreneurs, we're a little different, right? Like we know we just have something in us that just says, I think I can do more. And obviously that led you to, and whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, you kind of chase success, you chase the ladder, and there's always something bigger and better, right? Which ultimately I think is the fault at sometimes, right? Because what are you chasing? There's what's that famous quote about the fisherman, right? Who's like meets a banker or whatever it is, and he, that people listening, if you don't know that quote, I'll find a link to it and put it in the description. But basically, it puts life into perspective. Like, what are you living for? Are you living to retire, or are you something you can do right now? We're just making little.
I don't know it as a quote, but I know the story. Because it is so much like that, where you can only imagine finally being the day that you can go out into that little boat and do your fishing and come back, take a nap, the whole story. Yeah. And ultimately, this business guy is trying to take him all the way down this path to get to the same spot, So, I hear you. That was the dream. But I actually did enjoy working for myself. I think having control a little bit more than as an employee is a big deal. And so I really did enjoy that. The health issue was just something that I probably had something similar going on my whole life, but I just didn't know it, and it showed up actually on my 40th birthday.
Yeah. So up until that point then, you hadn't really had any health scares. You kind of just going through life, like working, enjoying things. Obviously, you mentioned 40, coming up on 40 years of marriage, traveling and just kind of enjoying,
Yeah.
Do you have kids as well?
I do. I have two kids. My daughter owns her own company, entrepreneur in LA. Los Angeles, and my son is here in Oklahoma City, and he is a co-founder for a company called Spoken Gospels.
Okay.
So they're both entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Was faith a big part of your life as well growing up? I know you mentioned
it was. I've always been a faith guy, but as the story will share, it became a little more real.
Yeah. Yeah, so you get to you're a business guy. You got your own mortgage business. You take it public. Do you sell the business after that, and then around the same time, or do you still have the business when you turn your 40th birthday?
When I turned 40 and went through what I did, I went ahead and stayed with the company, knowing that I probably was going to exit sometime. I exited in 2015. Company continued to exist. Okay. So I left my own little baby that I had created, which was difficult, but at the same time, I've done some consulting since and some various things. So all in the mortgage business.
All in the shocker.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. So 40th birthday comes around. And do you're just thinking, I need to get a physical just like I do every year and see my doctor and check up?
Yeah, I actually did think that 40 potentially is about halfway through my life. Sure. And I thought, I want to try to stay somewhat healthy. And I had seen some people, again, this was in Roswell, New Mexico, the mayor and a couple of city councilmen were actually runners, marathon runners. And I thought, that looks great. And I'm just going to go do that. And without any reading, without any training, I just pulled up some shorts, threw on a T-shirt, and took off running. And I'd gone about 5 minutes, and all of a sudden I felt extremely tired. Everything was heavy. And I knew I couldn't go much further. And so I walked a little bit. About a minute later, I was fine. And I took off again, went another 5 minutes. Same thing kind of happened. So I called a buddy of mine who is a marathon runner. He was also in my mortgage business and a very successful guy. And I said, hey, you're a marathon runner. What's the deal? What's taking place? And he said, can I be honest with you? And I was like, of course. And he said, Jeff, you're a wuss. I said, what do you mean I'm a wuss? And he said, Jeff, run 25 minutes and don't stop. Just bust through that human barrier. Yeah. And so I did just that. I took off running and I didn't stop, didn't matter. And at the end of 25 minutes, I had a little chest pain. Yeah. And I thought, wow, that's kind of weird. And I really didn't feel like I could say anything to my wife. She was actually in Lubbock, which is only a couple hour drive away from Roswell. And she was with her parents, who had both had open heart surgery within the last 45 days or so. And so I didn't say anything, but I was wrestling with my son there in Lubbock that evening, and I couldn't lift him. And I said something, hey, why don't you, let's not do that.
Yeah.
And my wife heard me and said, what's going on? And I told her. She said, I'm not going through this. You call that cardiologist friend of yours, and let's get this taken care of. Well, needless to say, next morning I was down at the hospital doing all the tests back in Roswell the next morning. And everything was fine. I had a little bit of chest pain, but it wasn't a big deal. And went home about 5:15 that evening. This is kind of the first red flag when your cell phone goes off and a cardiologist is on the other end. And he says, Jeff, I need to see you and Cindy in my office right now. And I said, Cindy, why do we need Cindy? And I kind of trying to joke it off a little bit. And he was like, Jeff, it's not funny. I need to see you in my office now. And so I said, that's fine. And so Cindy and I went down there, and walking in the hospital area, it's about 5:15, 5:30 then, and some of the employees were leaving. They ushered us in the back, and I thought we were going to a patient's room. We went right into his office, his personal office. That's red flag number 2. And we were sitting there, and he came in, and it's just like on TV. He's got his white lab coat on. He won't make eye contact with me, and he's looking at his clipboard, and he says, Jeff, I don't know how to tell you this, but you've blown through your mitral valve, and your heart's getting bigger and bigger, and quite frankly, it could explode.
Oh my gosh.
He said, you need to get your affairs in order. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, I went to some degree into a shock because I don't remember much more of what was said. Cindy and he talked about how they were going to fly me to Lubbock the next day to have open heart surgery and try to save my life. But I mean, this was easy math. I've got about 24 hours to live. And so we get in the car, and we're headed home. And I said, hey, I'd like to call this lady. She was in our mortgage business in El Paso. Her name's Marcy Oglesby, and she's a big prayer warrior. And I'd just like her to pray for me. And I called, and instead of doing that typical Christian thing of, oh, I'm so sorry, I'll pray for you, she said, okay, Jeff, I'll pray. And as soon as I hear what you're supposed to do, I'll call you and tell you exactly what to do. I thought that was really weird, and I just kind of blew it off and went through the rest of my day, maybe hugging my kids a little differently. And next morning on the way to the office to kind of clean things up a little bit, I got a phone call from Marcy, and she said, Jeff, I know exactly what you're supposed to do. I thought that was kind of weird. I was like, okay, tell me. And she said, well, I just saw Dr. Oz, Mehmet Oz, on Good Morning America, and he was talking about your heart surgery. And I just, I'm thankfully she couldn't see my face. I was just like, oh, okay, whatever. I'm not calling him. And I, as respectfully as I could, I hung up. And about that same time, that gentleman that told me to run 25 minutes and don't stop, he thinks it's his fault, and he's calling me. What are we doing, Jeff? And I said, well, before I tell you, let me tell you about this hilarious call I got from Marcy. And he says, I went through it all with him, and I said, isn't that funny? And he said, so let me get this straight. You asked her to pray for you. She prays. She tells you exactly what to do, and you're not going to call him? I said, no, I'm not going to call him. That would be so embarrassing. He's a celebrity. And he said, you call me after you've talked to him. And he hangs up on me. So I got that to live with if and when that really happens. And so I got to the office, and at that time you could still Google him. And I Googled him, and he's at the New York Columbia Presbyterian Hospital in New York City. And I called. Thankfully, he didn't pick up. I left him a long voicemail, told him exactly what the doctor had said, knowing I'd never hear back from him. Well, 7 minutes later, the phone rings, and my secretary says, Dr. Oz on line 2. Well, it was Dr. Oz, and he said, if everything you're telling me is what happened, I think I can help you. What I need you to do is overnight all those records to me, everything that you have, and I'll call you back in 24 hours and tell you, if I agree or whatever. Well, obviously that was difficult because I've got my buddy, who's the cardiologist, who's telling me, get on the plane, give us a chance to save your life.
Right.
Or do I follow what I believe are our faith, God-led steps to just 24 hours. And that's when I think it got a little bit difficult, was to just try to wait that out. We decided to do that. And 24 hours later, to his word, he called and he said, yeah, it's exactly as I thought. Your heart is getting bigger and bigger, but it's not going to explode. It's going to be about, my guess would be 6 months to 18 months. And we'll have to do an open heart surgery. But, we're going to be able to use this robotic arm. It's brand new. In fact, I was on Good Morning America yesterday morning talking about it, which really just kind of blew me away, how all those little things kind of came together. What I've come to learn them as God winks that go on every day. And so anyway, long story short, ended up taking about 2.5, 3 years before I did have surgery in New York City. And the night before having surgery, they do the final test to be sure everything's fine and make sure there isn't any issues with any of your arteries. And again, at that point, I'm only 42 years old. Nobody expects anything. But during that last test, they noticed that my main coronary artery was blocked over 80%. And they said I was a walking time bomb. And that the next morning, they would not only use that robotic arm so that I could still be part of their data pool, they were also going to have to open me up normally and go ahead and do all the bypasses and everything that they had to do. And so it changed from being a very serious surgery to definitely life-threatening. And I think that's when I got pretty fearful. I really thought God was either going to heal me or this was going to be a pretty simple thing, and this appeared to not be. And as they were rolling me into the operating room, for the first time in my life, I think I started questioning whether God was real, because none of this was happening the way I dreamt it. And so I prayed, and I know you're not supposed to, but I asked for a sign. I was like, God, just anything, let me know you're here. And we pushed through into the operating room, and it was just freezing in there. And I was like, okay, that's not the sign I'm looking for. I need something. And then as we got to the table, a gentleman said, okay, let's move him to the cutting board. Well,
subtle.
That level of sensitivity at that moment certainly wasn't the sign I was looking for. And I usually stop the story at that point and just share two things that you may already know partially. One is that I'm crazy about my wife, Cindy. And secondly is I have a cup of chai every morning. Okay. And it seems kind of silly, but I love to do it. And so I'm on the table, and this gentleman leans over me and says, Jeff, you've never met me before, but I'm your anesthesiologist, and I'm going to put you to sleep. More importantly, I'm going to wake you up. And he said, my name is Dr. Chai Kaninsky, but you can call me Chai. And, I kind of thought for just a second as that sort of was sinking in, and this lady leans over me, right over my head, and she said, now, Jeff, I want you to look around and see all the staff here and all the equipment. I'm going to make sure everything goes perfectly fine. And my name is Cindy. And, I just had this warmth come over me at that moment in time, and I just knew God had just given me a couple of his winks, and I knew everything was fine. Whether I lived through that surgery or not, that wasn't the point. The point was to know that he's in control, and I'd be fine. And I obviously survived, and everything went fine. Dr. Oz did that particular surgery, and then about 15 years later, here in Oklahoma City, medical technology had moved even further, and Dr. John Randolph from here in Oklahoma City did a second one, and now I get to be on This Is Oklahoma because
you get to tell stories and share that moment. Because so after the first surgery, then you go back to Roswell, New Mexico.
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, stayed in Roswell. I think surgery was in 2005.
Okay.
And I stayed there till about 2016, so another 11 years or so.
Yeah. One of, I think, my favorite, if not my favorite burrito places in Roswell, Burrito Express.
You're not going to believe this. I know the owners. They are super good friends of mine.
It's like, so I'm actually driving down there next week. I'll be down there Wednesday through Sunday.
Oh, how great.
And it is... So usually we fly, but this time we're driving, and every time we drive, I get to go to Burrito Express. Yeah. So I cannot wait to go and have a steak and bean cheese burrito, whatever it is, with that great handmade flour.
Yeah, and they now have 3 in Albuquerque. Part of the family is there. Yeah. So anytime you're in Albuquerque, you can do the same thing because it's the same food.
It's fantastic. If anyone listening wants to go and get the best burrito they've ever had, they need to go to Roswell or Albuquerque because it is, it's... I'm very much looking forward to that. So do you go? So once you have the first surgery, like what do you think? Man, I got to slow down a little bit. Do you start running? Like what's the? I mean, how do you take it after that? Because you've been given a second lease on life at that moment, right?
You really have, and they had led me to believe that although with a mechanical valve, which is what I have now, life is a little different. But not much. It's different kind of medication kind of thing, but I do everything. And I never became a marathon runner because I think I have a mental block against that. Yeah. But
that might have been a sign.
But certainly played tennis and golf and all that kind of stuff. So
So back to work slowly and just kind of get your mind working and let's.
Sure, I was back to work fairly quickly, maybe a little too quickly because I had a few issues there. But I was fine then, and boy, the second one here was just a dream. Yeah. This heart hospital that we have here in Oklahoma City is one of the most amazing places ever.
Yeah. So that ultimately is what brings you to Oklahoma City. Is for that second surgery, or did you move to?
No, we actually moved here. We moved our headquarters of Prime Source Mortgage here, and so I moved with the company. We were picking Dallas, Oklahoma City, or I believe Austin. We never even made it to Austin to check it out. We went to Dallas first, came to Oklahoma City, and never left because we love it.
What was the deciding factor to come to Oklahoma City then with the business over at Dallas?
Actually, it was traffic.
That's a huge factor.
As crazy as that may sound.
Yeah.
We could do the business part of it from anywhere.
Okay.
And so that wasn't as big a deal. The fact that we were a public company, they wanted us out of Roswell, New Mexico. Sure. They were tired of talking about aliens all the time with every investor. And so we chose Oklahoma City and have loved it and been here ever since.
Yeah. So. And at this time that you move here, do the kids come with you? How old are the kids at this point?
Both the kids went to ORU.
Okay, yeah.
And I think that introduced us to the state of Oklahoma. Sure. And both had great experiences, and so.
Yeah, it's a great campus up there, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really phenomenal.
And they have a brand new $30 million basketball facility now as well, which whenever you're up there, it's fantastic. My good friend of mine is the assistant golf coach up there, so we got a sneak peek before they opened the doors. And man, you look back and you think, if I had this, when I was in college, I mean, they have like on-site nutrition chef. I mean, and this is just for just the whole athletic department, not just basketball and football and everything. Basketball and baseball, I think there.
Since you're friends with the golf coach, does that put you and I on any golf course or not?
It should. They get to play some of the greatest golf courses in the state. I think when you go into their golf facility, the first room you go into, it's kind of like it's a little nook. It's got like a couch and stuff in it, and magazines, coffee table, and you look up on the walls and it has the 5 golf courses that they play, and it's the Patriot, Cedar Ridge, Southern Hills, Golf Club of Oklahoma, and just like and then you walk around the corner, you see the golf facility, and you're like, where do I sign? It's very smart at what they do. But their golf program is doing very well. So the love of golf start from a young age for you?
It did.
Okay.
Yeah, my dad instilled that in all of us. My brother and I think it stuck the most. Had a sister as well. She played a little golf, but it was mostly my brother and I. But I do recall at the age of 7, my dad said, we couldn't start until we were 8. And, that put a bite of the apple right in front of us. And we practiced and we were great that 6, 7. And by the time we teed off, I remember playing 105 holes my 8th birthday. We started at daybreak, and it's one of those free things for young kids, and we just played the whole day.
So when it's funny you say that, because my golf club back home, we couldn't join until our 8th birthday.
Yeah, that's something.
And my granddad, I have it today in my office here. I have my first golf club that he gave to me. That's the greatest thing ever. I have photos of me whacking golfers around the yard when I was, 6,
that's
7,
awesome
8 and stuff. But when we joined the golf club, it's just those summers. Parents drop you off in the morning and they pick you up when the sun's going down.
Exactly.
What have you done today? Like, play golf all day. It's just the greatest sport in the world. That's why I'm in this country. Love it, and will spend the rest of my days playing golf till I can, till I can't anymore. It's fantastic. But so back to moving to Oklahoma City. Then you decide, you and Cindy, the business is coming to Oklahoma City. Other than traffic, like Oklahoma City's grown so much in the last 10 to 12 years. But
sure,
what was kind of like what did you think of when you get here, and what are you, obviously golf, you're into golf as well, but what else does Oklahoma City say?
One of the biggest things was in Dallas, because again, we were comparing, but these turnoffs when you get off of 35 and you circle around to go somewhere else, there's all this room.
So much space.
Yeah, so much space. There's none in Dallas. And I know this sounds a little bit like I'm slamming Dallas. They've got some nice things there. But Oklahoma, that was really neat. The people were probably a close second, just so incredibly friendly. And we've loved the neighborhoods. We've been in 3 neighborhoods since we've been here. And, the people are all just incredibly friendly. So.
Yeah. So you're here quite a while, and then you have to have the second surgery. How does that come about? Is that just the timeline of just the first one?
After having the first, then I'm seeing a cardiologist specialist once a year. Sure. And I'm thinking everything's just clicking along just fine. And then a particular year, the surgery was in 87, so it was in 2016. The surgery was 2017. In 2016, he said, Jeff, it looks like you're leaking just a little bit again. We're going to have to schedule another open heart surgery to get this taken care of and put this finishing artificial valve in. And it's just different. The new ones are just so much better than they were 20 years ago. And as much as I hated to hear that, the description of the heart hospital and, once I met with Dr. John Randolph, he was the most amazing guy I've ever been around. He put me such at ease because I was just like, I don't want to do this again. Right. It was horrible in New York. The hospital, the only thing good was Dr. Oz and his team, that was it. The rest of the facility, I was not that pleased with. So this one was great, and but yeah, it had to be done. And so 2017 took care of that in April of 2017, and been great ever since.
Yeah, and kind of since obviously you've had both of these in that whole moment. I mean, what kind of leads you to talk about it? What leads you to share your story and tell others, as well as kind of just using it as a way to consult, and also, obviously with your business expertise and background there, you can kind of marry the two and talk about it in just a general way. Like, what leads you to that?
Well, it was fairly dramatic to have those things happen to me. And the reason why I'm sharing the story is because it had such an impact on my life. It was for the longest time, I just called them little nuggets that God gave us. Now, after a recent meeting, I was shared with me, and she said, please steal it. It's a God wink, in your life. And so I had actually written the story about all of it, and I ultimately wrote a book, just finished coming out first of this year, called Get Your Affairs in Order. And being my name, since it's Jeff Smith, I have my author name, and website is jeffreyrogersmith.com. And it's just easier to identify it that way. But I went through it. It's a fairly short book. It's probably 110 pages or so, but it gives the background that I've shared today and about 10 other stories. We went to the U.S. Open the day before the heart surgery, and it was just a last-minute idea of Cindy's to let's go. They're playing the finals, and I was like, honey, there's no way we can ever get in to see the finals of
tennis,
of the U.S. Open tennis. They're in Flushing Meadows, and she said, "Doesn't matter. Let's just try." And that story that I share in the book is an incredible God story, because it was actually September 11th, 2005. So it's the exact 4-year anniversary, and there were policemen at within feet of each other. And there was no way we were going to buy a ticket from somebody or something. That was just not going to happen. And some different events unfolded that allowed us to watch the match. And it was fun to even share that, put that in the book as well.
So in the book that you said there's about 10 stories, which we got time if you want to share some of your favorites, some of the ones that you think you'd like to share.
Yeah, the one that sticks out the most is that U.S. Open one. And I was so against and don't want to be embarrassed by somebody saying you can't do something. And Cindy doesn't care. She's like, I don't care, And I said, well, going up there looks like that's the gate, the front gate area. Just go, the deal was open. There was a gentleman behind there. And I stood back behind a little bit of a wall where they couldn't see me. And I said, and I'm listening, and she said, so we'd like to have 2 tickets to that thing that's happening today. What do you have, like some kind of a tennis tournament? And they laugh like you are. And he turns around to these other guys and says, this is hilarious. This lady wants 2 tickets to this. This lady has been sold out for months.
Yeah.
And he turns back around, and there are 2 tickets sitting on the dash right in the area right in front of her. And he said, whose are these? And nobody answered. And he said, I'll sell you these for face value if you want. They're $45 a piece. And I screamed, it's God.
Yeah.
Just a hilarious answer for something like that. And we got up to our seats. And if you're on a football field, we're basically on the 40-yard line, right in the middle. It's just an incredible place to sit. And I just knew that God was probably going to take me in this deal, because he's given me my final wish of the finals at the U.S. Open. And Andre Agassi and Roger Federer were playing. And it was a time when Agassi was at the very end of his career and Federer was at the beginning. And Agassi won 1 set, and his back just wouldn't hold up, and Federer wiped him up, 3-1. But it was a really neat experience to watch that and to see, again, looking back on it, God doing that for Cindy and I.
Yeah. The other thing, you talk about, you said the 2 things that, you have a chai in the morning and just your love for your wife, Cindy. How has this kind of just strengthened the relationship that you and your wife have through all of this, right? Because through tough times, it either breaks us or it makes us. And obviously, 40, coming up on 40 years, like for people listening that just, I've been married to my wife 7.5 years now, and she's awesome. And the way we met is just a storybook in itself. But, I always like to ask people like yourself who have been married for an extended period of time, a lot longer than we have, how do you get through the easy times? How do you get through the tough times? Like, what do you do to, and obviously faith is the center of that, but you've gone through an extremely tough time, multiple times. How has that kind of been for your relationship?
You're pretty perceptive, I think, to even ask that question, because we did have that 2.5 years to prepare for what potentially was going to be one of the roughest times. And I'm referring to the first heart surgery. And, Cindy was preparing to be a widow, and I was preparing to go to die. And without either of us ever verbally saying that, but things like I paid for our plot beforehand. Yeah. She didn't know it. I had what we called a death file, and I would say it almost callously to just say, hey, let's make sure we put that in the death file, and neither of us realized that there was a distance growing like that. And I think after I survived the surgery and everything was fine, Cindy and there was a glue that was put on that relationship that I think would have been difficult to have any other way. So in answer to your question, for those that don't have to go through this, which is something that I don't ever want to have happen again, is I do think both Cindy and I have a great habit of being able to submit to the other. And, it's always over just little things that couples, we seem to think bicker, or that ought to be my deal, or surely she can take the trash, whatever it is. And I have felt like she's always submitted to me. I always submit to her. And it's like we almost want to beat the other one to take care of something. And in doing that, I think it strengthens a relationship fairly dramatically.
Yeah. Yeah, it takes a lot of pressure off.
Yeah.
Right?
There's a guy named Andy Stanley that has written a couple of books on that, and it's something that Cindy and I've read, taught a couple of church couple classes over, and that's one I recommend highly.
Yeah. So do you guys kind of, do you do a lot of that then together, go speak and stuff? And it doesn't have to be church, but do you kind of welcome kind of the both of you rather than just you going and telling your story? Like,
for sure.
Obviously she's a huge part of it equally as well.
And it's so important to do that because she had a completely different perspective. And so I would say some things that she would totally disagree with. Case in point is the death file. She wouldn't say, don't do that. But she hated that. But there were a number of things. My son was only 8 when he heard about this, and 11 or 12 when I finally had the surgery. Well, he hadn't started growing any kind of facial hair or anything at that point, but he was asking me how to shave and how to tie a tie, and he was helping me put up the Christmas lights. And at the time, I thought, gosh, isn't that cool? He's being so inquisitive at this time, and he's wanting to help me. That's great. What I didn't know until long after the surgery was he was preparing to be the man of the house if I were gone. And so there were those kinds of things that I throw in the book as well, because I think it's important for people to hear that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because, it's heartbreaking stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like, and your 11-year-old son is like, hey, it's, how do I do a tie? How do I shave? How do I change a light bulb, a tire? Like, all the things that a dad does, right? Or generally, does growing up.
And I had a similar experience with my daughter. She was about 15, 16, so it was in that very difficult time for a lot of folks that a teenage daughter is pulling a little away from the dad, and the dad saying, do this, do that, instead of understanding a little more where she's coming from. And when it came down to the night before surgery, and I had to share the fact that this was going to be life or death, not what we thought initially, and I was talking to her on the phone because she was still in New Mexico, it was amazing how an adult person she was, and how we were able to have a conversation that I don't think she and I will ever forget. Yeah, it's really special.
And you have to have that conversation, no matter how tough and how difficult it is, right? Mm-hmm. And you almost have to have that conversation, not for you, but for her.
Yeah.
Right? Because, you could be selfish and just be like, I can't have this conversation. Everything will be fine. Love you. See you tomorrow.
Yep.
But that's, if the worst case happens, and she's going to remember that as your last conversation rather than you saying what you really want to get off your chest and say.
And, I think the important thing that you're saying right now is we have to have that conversation whether you have a pending heart surgery or not, because none of us know, none of us are promised the next hour.
Right.
And so have those critical conversations, those important, loving conversations with your kids.
Yeah. What are the things then post that one and post the second one that you don't take for granted? And, you might, because the big thing I have is, and there's a book out, I can't remember the name of it. It's called Die with Zero. And it basically talks about kind of, there's a lot of stats in there around the amount of money that you actually spend when you're retired, and talking about, there's certain seasons in life to spend more money than you should save, and you're not going to go rent you're not going to go skydiving and rent a Ferrari at age 80 years old, but you should do it when you're 35 to 40, because that's just the time makes sense, right? And it's a fascinating book, and I am someone that is big on experiences, because to your point, we don't know if we're going to be here tomorrow, and yes, you have to be sensible, right? Don't go financing a boat and all the other stuff if you can't afford it, or a house, you're in the mortgage business, whatever it is.
Sure.
But there's certain times in life that there are the seasons that that are best to do certain things. My question to you is there anything since those surgeries that you don't take for granted anymore, and you're like, let's go do this, let's go do that now, why wait, let's go do this? Is there anything that happened that you would tell or give advice to people like myself or any others listening that haven't gone through, 2 heart surgeries, and, as far as we know, we get one go at life, and to not waste it?
Well, I think, you said it, it's all about experience versus the dollar spent. There are times when we do have to spend a little more to get some kind of experience that we want. But I think the key is to think about those experiences in advance, have those. Don't allow money to hold you back. That's easy to say, I get that.
Sure.
But it doesn't mean you have to do it today. You could do it a year from now. But you make it a priority, and you become purposeful in your marriage and in your relationship with your kids to be sure that those experiences actually take place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is there any trips you guys took once you got done that you're like, come on, we're doing this, we got to celebrate?
Well, our 40th, we're headed to Hawaii.
Sure. Yeah.
So we've been there. We went on our 30th, I think.
Okay.
So that would have been after that as well. Yeah. But we enjoyed it so much, we kind of told ourselves that when we hit 40, we'd do it again.
Yeah.
I'm sure that we have taken some nice places, but even if we don't go to a particular place, even here in Oklahoma, this is a perfect podcast to share. There's so many amazing places that Cindy and I have not gone yet, and we should make those a high priority.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What is the plan now? What is the plan? Obviously, you have the book, right? The book is out. You're doing more speaking engagements. What do you want to do for the remainder and, the next, 15, 20, 30, 40, however many years we have left? What's the plan for you? How do you want to, tell your story and impact others and give back?
Yeah, I really want to be able to share this heart story at various organizations, places that would like to hear more about understanding that God does move in our lives every day. I think it's important that we know that. And having the book gives some validity to it. Tying it to Dr. Oz gives a little extra validity to it. The book is a lot of fun. Even though it's all talking about these different things, there's some humor throughout. So I love the opportunity of getting that out, being able to share the story. I think that's one of the reasons why God kept me around, was to share that story. So that's what I'm doing, even though I'm still in the mortgage business. I do some consulting for a company called Developers Mortgage Company, and we've got some offices throughout the Southwest as well as on the East Coast. So I do that. But in the meantime, the more important, in my opinion, is to share my heart story.
Yeah. because it's topic and on topic, and at this moment, mortgage rates people think are going to the moon. I'm in the real estate industry as well, and I keep telling people it's not as bad as it used to be. Believe me. What is the state of the union in the mortgage world right now from a professional's perspective?
Well, you almost always have to remind people of where rates were. When I first bought our first house, it was at 13.25, and we thought we got the deal of the century. And needless to say, when rates got as low as 3% and it sat there for a year or two, we all forgot where rates really are. And the fact that they're now between 6 and 7, and the likelihood is that they're going to come down a little, but for the most part, people can afford a home, can go ahead and pursue those dreams of home ownership in that 6% range.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where it's going to stay. I think we'll see a little improvement as we go into the election year, but everybody ought to realize that real estate is a cornerstone of our economy, and we can't buy homes if they're at 8, 9, 10%. So we've got to figure ways to get that rate and keep that rate in that 5 to 6% range.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the, one of the greatest investments, right, is real estate.
Absolutely.
So, especially if you can find a renter to pay even some of your mortgage. You don't have to find that 1% rental rate every single time. Just go find someone to, cover half of it, and you can afford it, and, you'll have a house paid off in 15, 20 years, 30 years, whatever it is. So it is a great investment. I keep battling I want to go buy a car instead of buying a rental house, but I think the rental house is going to win at some point because it makes a lot more sense. Although one of my favorite quotes in life is, you can't race a car. I can't race a house, but you can race a car. And my wife says, well, you'll be sleeping in said car if you buy one. You can do in a car and a house. But yeah, for people listening, the book is at jeffreyrogersmith.com. I'll put a link for that in the description.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Go to that. And what's your next engagement? When are you speaking next? Do you have anything coming up?
Yeah, I've got a couple of small groups, like various churches, men's group at Crossings. But actually, I don't have anything scheduled. Talking to a few mega churches, one in San Antonio that Matt Hagee, he and his wife have asked me to come on their TV show and maybe potentially talk to the church. But I think that would be one of the best ways, is throughout the United States, to get to various churches and to share my story.
Yeah. Great. Well, Jeff, thanks for coming in.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing your story. It's a wonderful story. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you reached out, and I'm glad you're using what you've been given to give back and teach others. It means a lot to them and puts a lot of people at ease, I'm sure.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
Thank you. For people listening, I'll talk to you in the next episode. Cheers. Hope you guys enjoyed that great episode. Thank you so much for listening. As always, huge shout out to our sponsors, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, sharing Oklahoma story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com and follow them on Instagram for daily updates at oklahomahof. Our other sponsor, the Chickasaw Nation, amazing sponsor. They do amazing things for the state, and they're always sponsoring something in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma, and without their support, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. And our third sponsor is Diffie Ford Lincoln down in El Reno. Now, this one makes me so happy because these guys are great friends of mine, play a lot of golf together. I've bought my cars from them, do most of my oil changes down there, have a cup of coffee, hang out down in El Reno. It's a good spot to go. And not only are they great friends, but they provide a great service. So for over 60 years, third generation family owned Oklahoma business down in El Reno. They're also in Bethany as well. So people in the Bethany area know the Diffies really well. But if you're looking for anything new, used, Ford, Lincoln, or whatever, I'm sure they could find anything you want. Check them out, diffieford.net, and then on Instagram at diffiefordlincoln. This episode is brought to you by Hope is Alive. Hope is Alive exists to radically change the lives of drug addicts, alcoholics, and those who love them. Join us on August 11th at the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum for a celebration of hope featuring guest speaker Tim Tebow and musical artist Ben Fuller. Find out more and get your tickets at hia10.com.
Thank you for listening. We are inspired by those around us and hope that you are too. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review so we can keep telling your stories. For more great Oklahoma content, follow This Is Oklahoma on Facebook and Instagram.